In today's world, people feel lost in a sea of ideas. Which ones should we accept? Stay tuned because you're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Here is your host, Kurt Jarris.
Well, a good day to you, and thanks for joining us here on another episode of Veracity Hill, where we are striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. It's a pleasure to be with you here in the Defenders Media offices in West Chicago, Illinois, and we are the, Chris, how do you say it? The only...
number one internationally broadcast apologetics podcast from West Chicago.
So that works for me. Basically, we're the only apologetics podcast coming out of West Chicago here. But it's good to be back here in the offices. Last week, I was at Crescent Lake Bible Camp, bringing you episode 52 last week. It was an Ask Me Anything episode, and hopefully you've had the opportunity to listen to that. If not, I want to encourage you to go back and to listen to some of the questions that people had. I want to thank you all for your engagement on that. Those that submitted questions ahead of time, or those that had questions right then and there while we were doing the live stream. Thanks for those questions. Of course, if you want to continue asking me questions, I'd be happy to entertain those. There are a few ways you can get in touch with me. So you can text the word Veracity, that's Veracity, to the number 555-888. And it's totally free. You can text questions in or comments into me. You can also email me, kurt@veracityhill.com. You can connect with us on Facebook or Twitter. Just search for Veracity Hill. And then lastly, if you want to call in anytime during the week, or especially during our shows, the number is 505-2STRIVE. That's 505-278-7483. So we've got a special guest on this week's episode, and he is a former professional baseball player. And I was connected with him through his cousin, actually. And so I'm very pleased to introduce to you Matt Murton. Matt, thanks for coming on the show today.
Kurt, thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. Now, so as most of my followers know, I'm a devout Cubs fan. And so I remember watching you when I was, I would have been late into high school. You made your debut with the Cubs in 2005. And we're with the Cubs for a few years, and you were a fan favorite. Maybe it was because of the red hair. Would you say that was one of the reasons why?
That's very possible. That red hair always had a way of giving me a little bit of an advantage.
So I know you were. I remember at the time you were one of my favorites because of your style of play. You were a contact hitter, and that I think was very important. And interestingly enough, it wasn't until a few years later, sort of the sabermetrics movement began to grow, and people became interested in those sorts of statistics and style of just simply getting on base. At any rate, so we've got a few questions here for you today, and wanted to talk about your journey along in recognizing that you had these special gifts. To be a professional athlete, because only so many people can become a professional athlete, and how you recognize those things and where it led you, and then we'll follow up at the end here with what you're up to today. So before I begin, let me thank you again for coming on the show, and looking forward to having a good discussion with you.
Yeah, man, thank you. I'm looking forward to it as well.
All right. So my first question for you is this. When I was about in third grade, I think it was, maybe it was second, I saw Michael Jordan play basketball for the first time. And I took a liking to playing basketball. Now, some people discover or become interested in sports earlier than that. For you, when did you realize that you first liked to play the game of baseball?
Well, I actually grew up in a home where my dad was a high school football coach, so I grew up around sports, and I think it's just natural, kind of whatever environment maybe that you're in, it's natural to kind of lean towards those things, and so for me, it was anything with a ball, so football, basketball, baseball, whatever it was, I loved playing it, and I remember seeing pictures of myself, certainly I don't remember it, but I remember pictures of myself and my parents of me at a couple years old, dragging that big red plastic bat around and swinging it. So the first time I actually played organized sport was when I was 6 years old in T-ball. But it was always something that I loved to do, just being around sport, enjoying sport from a very young age.
Nice. And is that something your parents very much encouraged, or you just discovered on your own? Do you have athletic parents? Does it sort of run in your family?
Yeah, sure. I think it was just kind of like I said, just a natural maturation. My dad played sports in high school. He played football, he wrestled, and he played baseball. This was up in Ohio, so wrestling was kind of big up there, and he loved it. He ended up playing collegiately. He played football. He played baseball as well.
Yeah.
He played at a small school. He was at a small school up in Ohio, Baldwin Wallace. And then it kind of ended for him there. So obviously Dad had some athletic ability to at least be able to go play in college, and him coaching it and kind of being around it, I think it just kind of was a natural thing for me to want to do it.
Nice. So you had that benefit of coming from a sports family, so that's good. Sure. I, on the other hand, I think I'm a whopping 5'8", so sports wasn't exactly. I mean, hey, Jose Altuve, he's short and he can hit the ball, so.
He sure can.
Yeah, I guess
can. That's the beauty in baseball. You can take
right.
a bunch of ordinary guys and actually take the time to learn a skill set. And there's a chance for us ordinary guys compared to the NBA or the NFL. That makes it a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You talked about how you played some other sports. Did you have any other interests as you grew up, any sort of academic or other hobbies, or were sports kind of your sole focus?
Yeah, you know what? I think I was kind of boring. In order to be, I really believe in order to be good at something that you have to be kind of boring. You have to be willing to do it over and over and over again. So I remember, obviously I had other interests. I was heavily involved in the church. I loved hanging out with my friends, but a lot of that stemmed around athletics. So I just remember it being in high school, and I'd have friends that tell me, it's like, man, your dad's like a drill sergeant. They didn't realize I was kind of making the choice for myself, but they're like, you never come out, do this or that. They said, you're either playing baseball or cutting grass. It seems like that's all you ever do. So needless to say, I guess it was somewhat of a boring, quote-unquote, boring person in my upbringing. Obviously, as a kid, I remember when I was like 12 years old and I got my first Nintendo Entertainment System, which was quite the thing at the time. So I enjoyed playing some video games. I was involved in the church and then sports, and that's pretty much watching sports on TV, playing them, and that's kind of who it was.
Well, I'm glad that you didn't become a professional video game player or a professional grass cutter. So,
yeah, that's exactly right. For my sake, I think that my skill set probably served me better with what I did. It's just the way it was intended to be.
Yeah. Okay, so at what point then, perhaps very early on for you, did you recognize? I mean, maybe it wasn't baseball, maybe it was another sport, but when did you recognize that baseball was going to be your vocation?
Yeah. You know what? That's a great question, because in all reality, I don't think that I realized that was going to be my vocation until I was probably like 19 or 20 years old.
Wow.
Here's the freedom that we had. See, I think things are changing now in today's culture, right? And what you're seeing now with the internet and with social media and just technology today, I think it has some distinct advantages. Obviously, the world has gotten a lot smaller, and we're able to communicate in ways that obviously we never have been. And I think that that's amazing. I think at the same time, there's so much information out there today. Kids are told who they are and what they are at a very young age. They're defined a lot younger, you know? And so for us, without having as much of that, we more or less just enjoyed playing sport. To be quite frank, until I was 16 years old, I never played more than probably 30 games a year. I played baseball in the spring, and I golfed in the summer, and played football until I couldn't do that anymore because of my neck, and in the fall, and basketball in the winter. So I tried all of it, and I think it was right around 15 years old. I was always fortunate enough to excel in sport at a young age. But I was never way bigger than any of the kids. I wasn't that kid. I just played sport and enjoyed it, and I was okay at it, right? And so when I was 15, my dad, having been around sport and coaching it, he thought that there was a chance that I had some ability to play it. But he really didn't know for certain because, he's dad, and obviously he might be a little biased or whatnot. So he had a friend down in South Florida that he had coached with. His name was Rich Hoffman at Westminster Christian. And Rich had Alex Rodriguez and Alex Cora and Doug Minkiewicz and a number of players, and was known to kind of produce a lot of higher end high school talent. They were national champs at one point. So Dad's like, he's got camps. I'm going to send you down there at 15. I think there's a chance I'm going to let him evaluate you. He'll tell me what he thinks. He's had a lot of great players and whatnot. And so when I went down there, Rich was kind enough he gave his opinion, and the opinion was one in which it led my parents to believe they wanted to create more opportunity for me. So starting at 16 years old, that's when I started playing in the summers in a place called East Cobb, and it was in Atlanta. And it was one of the better teams. It was one of the better teams in the country, and we traveled around and played. And I did that at 16. So 16, 17, 18, I was pretty serious about it.
That seems.
But all that really did was give the opportunity. Huh? Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, that seems relatively late in baseball for someone to discover that they're gifted in this area. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, in today's
society, right?
Here's the thing. Sure. Now I've heard Alex Cora with the Astros. My understanding is that he didn't get started till a little bit later as well. And I think what you hear from a lot of coaches nowadays is they stress, and the collegiate level actually, for kids to play multiple sports. And so we could get into this long discussion on a million different things. One in which would be obviously why are the arms breaking down the way they are today in baseball compared to years previous and stuff like that. And there's some science behind it. Maybe it's the amount of throwing they're doing at younger ages or whatnot. But point being, yes, at 15, 16 years old, that was quote-unquote late in the game. And as a reality, though, I really believe if you are truly gifted and talented in an area. Now, don't get me wrong. I played baseball my whole life. Right. And I just didn't attack it as my profession. I was a kid. And it never really became that serious to me in regards to pursuing it beyond what I was doing in that moment. So I was 16, and at that point, all I was wanting to do was see what would happen for college. Yeah. And then college came along, and I went to the Cape and had some success, and then the pro ball thing. And it wasn't until I was probably 28 years old when I was faced with the opportunity of going to Japan, and I sat there and said, because baseball was always just something I did that I enjoyed, and I loved it. I was on a ride. And I came to 28 years old, and I was making that decision about going to Japan, and it was all of a sudden, it was like, man, I would look in the mirror. I'm married. I have a child. I have one on the way. I was like, this is what I'm doing for a living, So it wasn't until I was probably 28 that it really smacked me in the face that I was actually making a living doing it, which I think was freeing to some degree,
Yeah. All right. So you made your debut with the Cubs in 2005, and by most accounts, I mean, you batted 321 your rookie year, 297 your sophomore year, 281 the following, but by that point you're getting limited at bats. All right, so some sports writers and some bloggers think that you didn't quite get a fair shot with the Cubs during the few years that you were here in Chicago, and you were an on-base percentage guy. You're I don't want to say average hitter. You were a good hitter, hitting for a good average. Right. So. But it seems like, if I were Dusty Baker, if I were Lou Piniella, I would have slotted you in as the number 2 hitter for all of eternity, or until you died, whichever came first. So was it a frustrating experience for you that perhaps the organization or the coaches at that time didn't value you as much as they might value, a guy with good OBP?
Look, I think at the end of the day, everybody has their story, right? And we all go through things in life, both positive and negative, and that's just the way the world is. We live in an imperfect world. And so I'd be lying to you if I didn't say at some point it was disappointing. I mean, I even go back to 2008, and I didn't have the best year. And a lot of that stemmed from the idea that I had a little bit of a pity party for myself based on circumstances, and I wasn't truly trusting in where I was and what I was supposed to be doing, and that there was a bigger picture than myself. And I was young, and, you get caught up in these things. But, based upon how it performed through that first introduction to Major League Baseball, and then the subsequent year by hitting 297, of which, to be honest with you, man, the beginning of that year, I wasn't hitting real well. I mean, opening day was nice. I remember hitting a home run on opening day in Cincinnati off Aaron Harang. to right center field there, and they call it the Great American Small Park. That's what the pitchers call it. But I didn't care if it was a small park or not. The ball went out. So,
Yeah.
Hit the home run there, and minus that, obviously, the beginning of '06 was a little bit of a slower start. You could say that maybe the league had made some adjustments to me or whatnot. But from July 1st on, I think it was, I really put up good numbers. I hit like 320 something again from July 1st on with like 9 homers, 40 something RBIs. And so if you combine that, I mean, 320 with 18 or so with, 80 some RBIs, that would have looked a lot different than my 13 and 60 something.
Mm-hmm.
And even in that year, I think I had 400 and some odd at bats, and maybe a full year's worth 600. So had I gotten those extra 600, what would the home run and RBI production been? Who knows? But at the end of the day, I really believe that I was always very fortunate in the game of baseball, right? So I had played at college, succeeded in high school. I played in a national tournament, had won it. Played in college, made it to College World Series. Had very fortunate to have a lot of success in the Cape. Was drafted relatively high. Within 2 years, I was in the big leagues, and I was succeeding.
Right.
So I think to some degree, Dusty, great guy, by the way, and I really appreciated him. But he felt, to some degree, the need, more of the old school. He's a player's coach, more of the old school, that he had to break me in to some degree. And so, there was somewhat of an earning it type thing, which I was cool with. And I think, to be quite honest with you, at the end of '06, I had finally started to gain that respect from him that I had kind of done what I needed to do to quote-unquote earn it.
Right.
And then, unfortunately, he was let go. And so we had a new guy in Lou Pinella come in. And to be frank, I just didn't fit his perception of what he wanted on the field. I was one of those guys who, my greatest asset was my barrel-to-ball ability. And I could make contact and hit balls hard and find a way to get hits, whether it was a swinging bunt or a line drive in the right center field gap or running into one every once in a while. I found a way to get hits.
Yeah.
And I had a knack and a feeling at the plate to do that. And that was my great tool. Beyond that, I was quite honestly good at everything, not exceptional at anything. So I was a good baseball player that could really hit. But Lou wanted somebody who either hit a bunch of homers or stole a bunch of bases.
Right.
So I didn't fit, right? I didn't kind of fit into that. So the long and short of it was I kind of got caught in a situation. And then we brought in Alfonso. It didn't work out in center, and he went to left and then right field. And I didn't play good defense in right. I had never really played out there, and I just didn't play well. So I could see why the circumstances led the way they did. And to sum it up, man, disappointing, yes. Was there times when I even wondered if I wanted to keep playing? Yes, because I'm like, what in the world else do I have to do? Yet at the same time, I believe in my heart of hearts, my ability was to hit with anybody. At any level I played, I could hit with anybody.
Yeah.
However, there was a plan far greater than myself, and I really believed it in my heart that while that experience, those first 6 years in the United States was tremendous, everything was set up for me to spend the 6 years I did in Japan. So looking back on it now, I am blessed. I'm thankful. I would have loved to have seen it gone differently in certain respects, but in the other respect, in regards to what's bigger than myself, I know it went exactly the way it was supposed to go. So to answer your question, yes and no. Disappointed.
Sure.
Think I could have done a lot more in Major League Baseball, yet at the same time, I know that there aren't any mistakes. So couldn't be happier with the way things worked out.
Okay, so let me give some folks some background here. So in 2008, you were traded along with, some guy named Josh Donaldson. I can't believe the Cubs actually owned him.
Yeah, I found that, right? He was the quote-unquote add-in on that deal. Isn't that funny?
Oh, that's crazy. So you're traded over to the Athletics with him and I guess a couple other guys in exchange for a couple pitchers that it was Rich Harden and Chad Gowden, I think,
or whatever.
Something like that. At any rate, Cubs fans have forgotten about those guys. We haven't forgotten about you, though. At any rate.
Well, I appreciate that.
And then you were traded over to Colorado. After that, so I was reading up on this. Colorado sold your contract. I didn't know that's the way it worked. Sold your contract to the Hanshin Tigers over in the Japanese league. So before I ask you about sort of your transition and experience there, tell me, what does that mean for a team to sell your contract as opposed to, say, you becoming a free agent?
So I'll try to keep this short, right? Because I can get long-winded. I think you've probably already picked up on that. So what happened in 2009 was at the end of the year, Dan O'Dowd called me, and he was the GM of the Rockies at the time. He told me, look, we got a team here who's interested in you over in Japan. What do you think? And so we kind of hashed it out. Once we came to the conclusion that we felt, and my wife was the first one to realize this. I was kind of kicking and screaming a little bit. But when we found out and realized that this is where we felt like we were being led to go, then Dan O'Dowd engaged them at a deeper level. And what they do is when you are a part of a 40-man roster, my rights are essentially owned by the Rockies. So what the club in Japan has to do is they have to buy me out. They had to pay the Rockies X amount of dollars to release me, to give me the opportunity to go there. Now, when the Rockies release me, quote unquote, they release me, and I have to sign a waiver that the only reason I'm being released is so that I can go
sign
play
with
in
another
Japan.
team.
No other team in baseball can pick me up. Yes.
Gotcha.
So that's how it kind of went down. They contacted me. We went through the whole thing, made the decision. They sold my quote unquote contract by the Tigers purchasing me from the Rockies, and then I was their property for the next 6 years.
Gotcha. Okay, so now this is where your professional career takes an interesting and great turn. So in your rookie year with the Tigers, you hit 349, 17 homers, and 91 ribbies. So in that year, not only did you win the batting title, but you became the single-season hits leader, surpassing none other than Ichiro Suzuki's mark or hold on that title. That's amazing.
Yeah.
What was the transition like going from the United States, your home, over to a foreign country, and especially one where, English, at least in Western Europe, everyone speaks English as a second language. But over in Japan, I take it that's not necessarily the case.
No. I'll tell you, the thing that was extremely interesting is we got on that plane and took a flight over there. And I remember thinking that flying to Arizona or California was a long way. And we got on that plane and we started flying. I remember watching a movie and, reading a little bit of a book, watching another movie and looking down at my watch and being like, dude, we're not even halfway yet. And so the little bit of the quote unquote sticker shock was just exactly how far it was away that Japan was. And you get off the plane and you realize that they're not speaking your language, and it sounds like they're speaking a million miles an hour, and there's symbols everywhere, and it's like, what in the world did I get myself into? But yet at the same time, I knew there was a plan and there was a purpose. And so going over there, obviously that first year, I kind of had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder. I was like, you know what? I'm excited to be here. I've heard that Japanese baseball is really good, and I've got an opportunity to go out and show what I think I'm capable of doing in baseball. Because up until that point, I thought my biggest thing was I just hadn't had the opportunity. So when I got out there, obviously there was a cultural shock to some degree, but I really had a piece about it, man. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt that's where I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that year, obviously, I believed in my abilities. I believed in my talent. I knew I could hit with anybody, and I was fortunate enough to be able to show that in that first year. But with that being said, man, it was just all the I's were dotted, all the T's were crossed, everything went as you could have hoped, and that wasn't because of me, and it never was, and it was far beyond me. And so just to see how it really, I tell people, like, when I went through that first year and everything worked out the way it did, and I could go through detail after detail of how things came together, but at the end of the year, I remember standing and I had an opportunity to share just a little bit about my background and who I was and kind of what my quote-unquote Western culture was about. And I was up there sharing in front of, no exaggeration, 10,000 Japanese people.
Oh, nice.
And it just was like a culmination for me of exactly why it was that I was there.
Sure.
And
yeah.
So throughout the whole journey, man, there in all sincerity, there were some difficult times from here and there, but I just had always felt this peace because I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. So
yeah.
First year was a great ride, and we enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah. So before I ask you some questions about sort of what you felt was your purpose there, let me just get to a couple more here about baseball. So I'm curious,
Sure.
How is the game of baseball different between the United States and Japan? What are some of the main features that you noticed were different about the game?
They take infield every day. That kind of wore me out. They stretch for like 45 minutes before they do anything else. That was different. They take batting practice on the field, and I don't know, I'm sure you've been to the ballpark where you show up early and there's the one batting cage on the field, and
Right.
guys are warming up, taking BP. Not in Japan. There's 2 cages on the field, and balls are going everywhere. So there were some definite differences. We got between the line. Obviously, baseball still baseball.
Mhm.
I think the biggest difference I saw was from a hitting standpoint was the fact that the American game is predicated based on getting hitters out in 3 pitches or less.
Mm-hmm.
And when you went to Japan, so essentially here in the United States, they pitch to contact. They allow their sink, their movement, whatever it is. And that's changing a little bit now because strikeout rates are increasing and balls aren't being put in play like they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
But it was sinkers and sliders, get the ball in play, get them out, and let's get the game moving, let's save our pitch count. Well, you go to Japan, it's all smoke and mirrors. It's all like, let's try to get them to swing and miss. Let's get them to, let's throw pitches that start as strikes and finish as balls, and pitches that start as balls and finish as strikes. And so they're not afraid to walk you. They're not afraid to go deep in the count. They're not afraid to throw 3-1 splits in the dirt just to see if you're going to swing. So
a 3-1
really
pitch.
challenged me. 3-1 split in the dirt. I'm like, are you serious? I remember there was a situation at one point where the game, obviously in a baseball game, the score situation will dictate how the pitcher will attack hitters.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in a situation late in the game, and it's like 8 or 9 run differential, and there's like a runner on first and second with like 1 out, and I got and it wasn't just me. Okay, this happened. This was routine. Now certain hitters had it happen more.
Mm-hmm.
I remember getting like a 3-1 slider in the dirt, and I was like, slow the bases with 1 out and an 8 run. Like, what are you doing? So it was. I'll tell you, there were times where it was extremely effective. So. Yeah. I think that was the greatest difference in just my approach and how I had to. I remember Ryan Spielberg, who used to play for the Rockies. He came over to play, and we would talk. And I said, if anything, what you have to do is reverse the counts. When you are ahead in the count, think more defensively, and when you are behind the count, think more offensively. So just the pitching style and how they attacked hitters, I would say, was the single greatest difference. Yeah.
Interesting.
For sure.
All right. So initially you were signed on to just play for a year there in Japan, right? But you ultimately decided to stick around. What was the reasoning for that?
Okay, so after my first year, I had 1 year with the club option. Basically, I had no say in the matter. Mm-hmm. And after the first year, which went pretty well, they decided to exercise their option, so I went back for year 2. After the 2011 season, I had a decision to make. And at that point in time, I was 30 years old. Well, I had just completed my 29-year-old season. And at 30, I was still at an age where the possibility to come home was there. Mm-hmm. And there was a few teams that were actually interested in bringing me back. But when I came back, it was going to be on a 1-year deal. And the amount of money that I was going to receive was great money in the big picture. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't a commitment from an organization that would say, hey, you're our guy. In other words, you're coming back under the pretense that you still have to earn it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And at that time, the club in Japan had offered us a 2-year guaranteed contract, and they were going to offer us significantly more money than what we would have seen in Major League Baseball. And with a young family and where we were, it just was one of those things that was kind of obvious. Yeah. Not only that, from a financial standpoint, but I remember having a conversation with a guy named Brian Hummel, who is the chaplain for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And we were out there doing a clinic for kids. And at the end of the clinic, we had the opportunity to share a little bit more about our faith. And we were being out there, and he told me, we were in the car, and we were talking about this. Should I go back to the U.S. and try to get the opportunity to play in Major League Baseball again with a guaranteed MLB, like 1-year contract? Or do I stay here? And he looked at me and he said, Matt, he goes, don't take this the wrong way. He's like, but we got plenty of athletes in the U.S. who are willing to speak on their faith. He's like, over here in Japan, this doesn't happen. There's less than 1% of the population, is accepting of who Jesus Christ is, and there's not a whole lot of voice over there for the kingdom. And he's like, man, if it's put all the money aside, put everything aside, kingdom perspective, man, this is really my heart where you're.
That's where you should be. Yeah.
So, and that's where we were. So we ended up signing for another 2 years. We came to the end of that, and I think at that time I was going to be 32, and it was another good contract in front of me. And
let's do it again.
Another 1 year with an option. That's right.
Yeah.
1 year with an option. After the 2014 season, I had teams calling again, giving me legitimate. I won the batting title in 2014. I had another really good year, and there were some teams willing to give me a shot to come back, but the club still had an option on me for 15, and they obviously exercised it based on my performance.
Yeah.
And that's what took us all the way through those 6 years there in Japan. It was just one little step led to another, and 6 years later, we look back. We went over there for 1 year, thinking we'd go over there, prove ourselves, and come back, and come back and play Major League Baseball. And obviously, my plans are never what it ends up being. So
sure.
6 years later, we look back on it, and we loved every minute of it, though.
Yeah. What are some of your fondest memories of being in Japan?
People, the relationships, and some of the people are still able to stay in contact with, which has been cool. Just the being in the stadium. When you were at Wrigley Field, I always remember there was things that kind of stood out. The smell of the ballpark, when you stepped out of the dugout. As random as this is, I remember, I think it was the peanut vendors would kind of make that sound where they would hit the side of their thing and you hear the band. And that sound resonates with me at Wrigley Field. Just the sounds, the smells. All of that resonates with me. And so, like, when I was in Japan, I was very fortunate to play for an organization that was much like the Cubs/Red Sox, whatever you want to call it. And the passion of the fan base was there. We averaged over 40,000 people a night at our games. So you can just kind of sit there, and I remember being in the outfield and looking around and just thinking how amazing it was to have an opportunity to play in that environment in a foreign country. Yeah. And the waving of the flags, which is almost like an international soccer feel, and all those things, just the memories of being on the field, obviously the people, the memories of being on the field and the food, getting to experience a new culture in regards to not only how they do life, but their food and everything. There's a long list of things that I did enjoy about being over there. It's a lot of fun.
Nice. Great. Awesome. Well, I'm here chatting with Matt Murton, and we've got to take a short break here. If you've got a question for Matt or a comment and you want to say hi to him, give us a call. The number is 505-2STRIVE. That's 505-278-7483. Stick with us through this short break from our sponsors.
You're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
Hello, I'm David Smith, the Executive Director of Illinois Family Institute, a state-based Christian pro-life and pro-family public policy organization. I want to invite you to join us as we seek to be salt and light to a dark and rapidly decaying culture. You can do that in a number of ways. For example, you can join our email list to get timely alerts and great cultural commentaries. You can like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, listen to our podcasts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can attend one or more of the special events and forums we host in different parts of the state. We do all these things to encourage and equip Christians in Illinois. You see, we need you to help us fulfill our mission to boldly bring a biblical perspective to public policy. Our faith requires us to be bold, speak truthfully, and love our neighbors. Join us. Visit illinoisfamily.org to learn more.
Evangelical Christians are talking about hell. What if we believe what we believe because we've always believed it? What if the gospel is really a matter of life and death? We want you to open your mind, open your Bible, and rethink hell. At rethinkinghell.com, evangelicals look at what the Bible says about hell, putting conventional and controversial views to the test.
All right. Thanks for sticking with us through that short break from our sponsors. And again, I'm here with former professional baseball player Matt Murton. And today we're talking about his experience, his journey, his story, and how he has been gifted with these certain talents and how he's used these talents. And now, before we get into continuing that discussion, we want to have what was a segment of the show a while back, so we might be bringing it back here, called Rapid Questions. Matt's agreed to to be quizzed on this. So Matt, we've got 21 questions, so it's very unlikely we'll get through all of them. And in fact, I'm going to skip number 6, which is asking you about your favorite sport. I think everyone could figure that out. So we're gonna start the game clock here, and you're gonna try to answer as many as you can. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. What is your clothing store of choice?
Nordstrom.
Taco Bell or KFC?
Taco Bell.
What school did you go to?
Westminster Academy.
Where would you like to
And I
live?
went to Georgia Tech in college. Sorry. Go ahead.
Where would you like to live?
Nashville, Tennessee, of course. That's where I'm at now.
What kind of razor do you use?
The cheapest I can find. Chick.
What's your spouse's favorite holiday?
Christmas.
What fruit would you say your head is shaped like?
Oh my gosh. Apple.
What's your most hated sports franchise?
Apple. It's red, right?
Yeah, right.
What's the next one?
Most hated sports franchise.
Oh, geez. I don't know that why not the Yankees, right?
All right, good choice. Do you drink Dr. Pepper?
Of course I do.
Oh, good man. Which celebrity are you most like?
Oh my goodness. Celebrity that I'm the most like.
Maybe a doppelganger?
Yeah, no, maybe Carrot Head.
Carrot Head. That's great.
There you go. Or maybe Conan, right? There you go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, nice. Great, awesome. Well, thank you for playing a round of rapid questions.
Yeah, no problem, man.
All right, so before the break, we were talking about your experience, through your upbringing, you recognizing that baseball, you were really good at it, and you were focusing on it as your vocation, and of course your debut with the Chicago Cubs, being with them for a few years, and then moving around a little bit, and then ultimately settling in Japan for 6 years. Now, last year, perhaps some people don't know this about you. Last year, you came back to the MLB and played for the Iowa Cubs. What was your experience in thinking that you wanted to sort of have a comeback here?
Well, I'd always said that that's kind of what I wanted to do, and we continue to. I really am a firm believer in continuing to complete what's before you until it becomes obvious that door is closing. And to be just frank with you, at 6 years, I was actually the longest tenured foreign position player in the club history. To be 6 years with the one team, it's not completely common for teams to keep foreign hitters around. You usually see 3-4 years maybe. So 6 years was a really good run with them. I think part of it is they get tired of seeing foreigners on the field every day. They're just very proud of their heritage and their culture, which they should be, and they want to see Japanese players. So they want something new. And obviously, the better we play, the more our salary rises. It gets to a point where they just usually let us go. So 6-year run was really good for me there. I came to the end of the year, contract was up, and it was whether or not I wanted to try to entertain going to a different city and accept a lot less pay than what I was receiving at the time, or was God closing that door and making it an opportunity to come back to the United States after 6 years I just couldn't see. And that's kind of what we felt. So we felt like our time with the Tigers there was amazing. We really didn't want to go anywhere else because that was home to us. And what better way to come back to the United States than with the Chicago Cubs when that opportunity came up? So we couldn't pass on it, and we just figured, what the heck, let's go see what happens. See what happens.
Nice. I like it. All right. So you're a few years older than I am, and I guess you're probably outside of the millennial generation. Now, I was the type of kid that I'd always get the participation trophies. Didn't know why I was getting a trophy. We never won the championship except when I was 13 years old. But always got that trophy no matter what. In your career, you've had to learn perhaps with more lows than highs, whether you were designated for assignment or being traded. So what advice do you have for young folks who might be dealing with disappointment in their careers?
Well, I think more than anything, I think the first step is realizing that no matter who you are, there are going to be disappointments in life. You know, now some are more apparent than others, and for some people maybe it doesn't seem as if they're dealing with things as often as others. But first and foremost, we're all going to deal with them, right? So
Yeah.
I think coming to that conclusion is important. And then moving from there, it was always one of those things where, like, at the end of the day, you have to believe in yourself, and you have to believe in what you're trying to accomplish, and you can't let other people define you. And so for the longest time, I always said that baseball is what I did. It wasn't who I was, and baseball never was supposed to define who I was. And for me, and I've touched on it a little bit, I grew up in a home where I was in church, and I came to a saving knowledge of who our Creator God, Jesus Christ, was. And for me, there was a lot of freedom in that, because I won't tell you that there weren't times where, in and of myself, I wasn't frustrated or I wasn't disappointed, because that was surely the case. But it was a way for me to kind of deal with those things, was knowing that there was a bigger plan. And I can go back and look at 2008 when I had a tough year mentally, emotionally. I didn't know if I wanted to play baseball anymore. And I remember even breaking down in my car and kind of crying. And I'm like, man, what in the world am I supposed to do? Like, I've done everything in the sport that I can do, and I still am not getting the quote-unquote opportunity. And then I stood on the stage in 2010 shooting to 10,000 Japanese people. And I remember thinking back to 2008 and realizing just how foolish I was because I wasn't trusting. So any advice I would have to someone who is obviously dead at this point in time is, one, you're not the only one. That there are others like you. You're not in it by yourself. Secondly, for me as a believer, it was the idea that I knew that there was a greater plan. Even though I didn't always want to trust that, I knew in my heart of hearts conceptually that there was a greater plan. And that thirdly, if we just give it time, it often we will see. We don't always. Sometimes maybe we won't see it in this lifetime, but we will find out why things were happening the way they did. So perseverance is key. You know, believing in things are happening for a reason, even though it's not comfortable. Sometimes the most uncomfortable moments provide us with the most amazing moments and jubilation on the backside of it. So as I've gotten older, I've realized that. When I was going through it, it wasn't the easiest, but I would just, I guess to sum it up, I'd say believe and trust, knowing that you're not the only one going through it, and you just got to find a way to persevere and stick it out. In the end, it'll find a way of working itself out.
Yeah, great, good advice. All right, now, in my humble opinion, you are a stellar hitter. So you know, only so many people on the planet can hit a 90+ mile an hour fastball and get on base 3 to 4 times out of 10 at bats. So, what does it mean to dedicate oneself to a craft?
You know, again, it kind of goes back to the same thing, and the idea that, man, you're gonna have to realize you're gonna accept failure, and that's what I loved about baseball, and I still love about baseball. I love about sport is the idea of all of the life principles it teaches you, and some of those being the fact that failure in our sport, baseball, is prevalent. I mean, if you three times out of 10 you've done a tremendous job, and 7 times you're going back to the dugout,
right?
And you haven't quote unquote succeeded. So, I think more than anything, it's the idea when you're committing to a craft, you're going to accept failure, and it's just that mentality that there's nothing that will get between where I'm at and where I'm trying to go. And what I mean by that is, I think the best way to do that is to live in the moment. So when I'm in the moment and I am competing in the moment, or I am loving people in the moment, or whatever it is, I'm trying to be the best at what I'm doing right now. And so I knew that in order to do that, one thing my dad always taught me was, look, you don't have to play some, but if you're going to play, you're going to do it the right way. And so if it was just for those 30 games or whatever it was dedicating myself to whatever it was I was trying to accomplish and living in the moment to be the best that I could. And I think that's what it means to dedicate yourself to a craft. It's, you have to have the big picture, and yet at the same time with the big picture, you realize all that comes with that. But if you worry about all of those things in the moment, you're not going to succeed. So it's just taking it one step at a time, you know, walking and trusting by faith, and then allowing it to kind of unfold. And going back and like I look back on my quote unquote story or how baseball kind of unfolded for me, to be honest, the best way to sum it up was just took one step and put one foot in front of the other. And here I am at 35 years old, fortunate enough to have played 14 years professionally.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be more, blessed or thankful for how it went.
Nice. Now, okay, so you've talked a little bit about this thus far. So you're a follower of the way, at least as the book of Acts tells us. And by that, I'm not referring to the Japanese philosophy of Taoism, which that's what it's translated into, way, but rather you are a follower of Jesus Christ. So how long have you been a Christian, and what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus?
Yeah, man, I accepted Christ at the age of 6. Like I mentioned, I grew up in a Christian home. I was in the church from the day I was born. And I was made aware of my sinful nature. I think the best way to put it, there's a few things that I always try to share. Mm-hmm. First and foremost, I think if you ask anybody, I think they would probably admit to the fact that they're not perfect and that they make mistakes. And with that being said, if we always rely on ourselves and ourselves only, then we're going to find a way to jack it up, unfortunately, more often than we want to. Secondly, when we talk about faith, we look back in our history books and whatever it is, and people tell us about Christopher Columbus or whatever, or we go downtown somewhere and we see this old structure that was built. We didn't see that structure built. We didn't see the bricklayers or the people running the piping or whatever it was, but there the building is, right?
Right.
And so we have faith to believe that somebody put it there. And so when you look at the world that we live in, just to think that it just appeared or just somehow is just here is kind of difficult for me to wrap my mind around, And so being a Christian to me is the acceptance of something greater than yourself, knowing that in and of yourself that you are going to jack it up and we're going to make mistakes, and that following Jesus is a relationship. And so many people want to make Jesus Christ a religious, cultural obligation or whatever it is. Our only obligation is to love as Christ loved us. And that is our obligation, is to care for other people and to accept Jesus and accept him and believe in him. It says that in John 3:16, for God so loved the world that whoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. And the key thing there is that for God so loved the world, number one, so it's for all people. Number two, all we have to do is believe. Because in and of ourselves, if it's about us and what we're going to accomplish, we already have admitted to the fact that we're going to jack it up. Yeah. So to me, it's having that faith, man. It's just it's loving people the way Christ did. It's following him. And to some people maybe that are listening or that whatever, maybe they've never heard that before. But first of all, Jesus Christ loves you, and he died for you. And people sometimes they say, "Oh, well, I don't know what that means." Trust me, I promise you. If you come to a saving faith of who Jesus Christ is, you'll never want to give him back. You'll never return him. And it's just this freedom inside of you that makes you feel like you can accomplish anything. And that's one of the reasons why I came back. It doesn't make sense at 35 years old, 34 years old to come back to the United States and try to. But I knew if it was God's intention that he would move mountains and he would do whatever he had to do for it to happen. And if he didn't, and even if he didn't, that it was my duty to just follow what he had for me. Yeah. So that to me, that sums up what being a Christian is.
Yeah. Let me say two things on that. You're right. It's not only a cultural thing that we should call ourselves Christians. It's not like, oh yeah, I went to church once, or it's not even I said this prayer once, because when we have faith in Christ, that lives itself out in our lives with how we treat others, and in bearing the fruit of the Spirit. Secondly, I love the way that you just phrased that about, if it didn't work out. In the book of Daniel, you've got the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and King Nebuchadnezzar throws them in the fiery furnace. A lot of people miss this, though. They say they're going to pray that their God, Yahweh, save them. But then they also say this. They say, but even if he doesn't, we won't bow down to you. Right. And so it's totally right that even if things don't work out the way we think God might work, that's not going to change our beliefs. We're still going to be faithful to him. So that's great. I love the way you phrase that. All right, we've had a patient caller here. Matt, I've got a few more questions here, but let's take a call here from James. James, thanks for coming on the show today.
What's going on? Thanks, Kurt. How you guys doing today?
Yeah, good. How are you? What, you got a comment or question for Matt?
Yeah, how you doing, Matt? I've been a lifelong Cubs fan. You know, I was a fan of yours when you were here. What do you think your greatest achievement was as a Cub, besides getting called up?
That's a great question, and you know what? I would want to say that my greatest achievement was the opportunity to develop the relationships and whatnot and all that, and that's exactly how I feel in my heart. But I know what you're looking for is probably something a little bit more tangible, and I would say there was a few moments that I really recall that really stood out to me as a player. Obviously, my debut was pretty cool, facing Dontrelle Willis down there in Florida, and being able to come up with a base hit in my first debut was pretty sweet. I remember scoring the winning run. I believe it was in 2007 it was, when we took first place and touching home plate and Cliff Floyd ran down and we were all jumping around having a good time. And we had obtained first place at that point. That was pretty special. And I think one of the other ones that kind of stands out in my mind was in Houston, actually. We were facing Brad Lidge in the ninth inning of a game that I actually pinch hit in. Hit a home run to tie the game and then ended up getting a base hit, and we won it in like the, 15th, 16th inning. I came off the bench and had like 4 at-bats that day. Lastly, I guess one of the other ones that was a great accomplishment, and I guess it would have to be my greatest accomplishment from a personal standpoint, was the day that I had 4 doubles, tying a major league record at Wrigley Field against, I believe it was the Arizona Diamondbacks. So I think those are all standing out. I mean, team-wise, first place, home run to tie a game, and then winning it, and then obviously the 4 for 4 with 4 doubles. Now, listen, we won't tell people that one of those doubles was because of the Wrigley Field sun in right field. We won't tell people that. Okay, we'll just go ahead. We'll just go ahead and believe it to be 4 laced balls in the gap. But one of those early balls, I think it was Carlos Quentin. Actually, the Wrigley Field, when the sun's setting there in the late in the game, it can get pretty difficult. And I think he had a hard time finding it. And the next thing you know, I was on second base. But man, I had a lot of great memories from being a Cub. I appreciate you calling.
Thanks, man. Thank you, Kurt, for letting me call in. You guys have a good day, all right?
Awesome. Thanks for listening and calling in, James. Take care.
Take it easy.
All right. So, Matt, I've got a couple other questions here about your faith. So, how did your faith in Christ, and perhaps we could also say the counseling of the Holy Spirit, help you along your journey through those highs and lows?
Yeah. More than anything, it's just, again, going back to some of the things that I guess I'm repeating, is the idea that, as a believer in Christ, that ultimately that a lot of things, I feel it's our duty to show up. I think it's our duty to work extremely hard. I think it's our duty to play hard, to work hard, whatever it is we're doing in life, unto the glory of God. Mm-hmm. And with that being said, in regards to the high and the lows, man, it's so free, and there's the freedom of the Spirit, that apart from me, it says in Jonah, that you can do nothing. And so just knowing that as long as I stay connected to Jesus Christ, as he is connected to the Father, that at the end of the day, no matter what the circumstance is, that it will be for his glory, and at the end of the day, it will make sense to him and in a kingdom eternal perspective. Mm-hmm. Because there's going to be things in this earth, on this world, that doesn't make sense to us. There's going to be things that break our heart. There's going to be disappointments. There's going to be times where things aren't going well. And yet at the same time, people ask, where do you get the hope? Like, it's a kind of a hopeless situation. Well, the hope comes in the idea that, man, you know what? I don't have to figure every last bit of this out. I'm going to trust that he's got this taken care of. I'm going to just let myself fall into his loving arms, and he's going to make a way where there seems to be no way. So, to me, that's where the freedom comes. That's where the highs and the lows. I remember sitting on the bench in 2010, about to break Ichiro Suzuki's record, and there were all kinds of media and people, and there was so much attention on me. And I remember sitting there and being extremely humbled and by the fact that God had put me in that position. I still, to this day, feel as if some of my best spiritual moments, some of them were on the field at Wrigley.
Nice.
Right? And there was people that would paint their chests with my letters, and Murton would be out there in the list of bleachers. And I would do something actually decently on the field, and they'd be chanting Murton or something. And I remember being in those moments and feeling the sense of the Spirit. And I would tell myself, Lord, they're saying your name. Lord, let this be a reflection on who you are. And so there was this overwhelming feeling, knowing that no matter what it was, whether it was the highs or the lows, that it was all about what he wanted and how it was going to glorify his name. And so there was the freedom in both the highs and the lows. It was just trusting in the fact that he had it all figured out.
Nice. Okay, now in Japan, only about 1% of the population is Christian. So you've already mentioned this one time you've had, you were able to sort of present a message to about 10,000 people. What other sort of opportunities did you have in Japan to share the good news?
Sure. I always felt like it was important that when we were given the platform to use it the way that it was intended to be used. I heard an interview here recently, I think Derek Carr, quarterback for the Oakland Raiders.
He's given his tithe.
It was a pretty, yeah, dude. It was a pretty special interview.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people to watch it if they haven't seen it already. But, I think that defines kind of what our opportunity is as athletes. I don't think that in any way we're any different or special than anybody else. I think we've just been given a talent and we've been given a platform to use. And so when I was in Japan, I had wished that the time in Chicago would have lasted longer to be able to get a lot more involved there. It just didn't work out. But once I was in Japan and I got settled in there and I realized there was that platform, that opportunity, I got involved on a lot of different levels. So I spent time, obviously, in the hospitals with the kids who were sick. We did stuff with the Tohoku deal. If people may not recall, in 2011, there was the great earthquake in the Sendai region, which had the big tsunami. So after the fact, there was a lot of relief work that had to be done. Amazingly enough, there was people that didn't have enough rice, which is obviously a staple there for food. So we went up there with some projects and made sure that there was enough rice for the people to have. Got into detention centers with kids, spent time with them, and then did clinics and outreach events, spent time with the homeless and feeding the homeless and stuff. So there was a lot of really cool opportunities during the time period that I was there to share to businessmen, have a platform to share to the businessmen. And in the Japanese culture, the men are very much so still the kind of the focal point of the culture, and they spend a lot of time at work. So, man, there was just a number of things that the doors were just opened to be able to participate in, and it was just a lot of fun just to be a part of it. Nice.
All right, is there one more comeback for Matt Murton? What else are you doing with yourself these days?
Yeah, that's funny. So when I got done playing April 17th, it was actually my last game was on Easter Sunday. My last swing of the bat was a line drive off the right field wall, and I turned first base, and I ended up staying at first. So I jokingly say, Easter Sunday was my last game. My kids ran the bases, and I came around first base, and my guy over there was telling me, hold. So I said there was two things. I said, number one, I said, when you hit first base on a ball off the wall and you don't get the second, I said, maybe that's a sign that it's coming to a close. Number two, I guess for the first time I was quote-unquote released on the 17th, and the guy that was having to give me the paperwork I had to file, I asked him, I said, do you mind if I take a picture of this for documentation? He sort of looked at me. Yeah, I know that's kind of an odd request. Most guys are kind of kicking and screaming and quite upset, but I was trying to love people and take a picture and document, whatever. Yeah. It's about my career. And so my brother was like, if you're taking pictures of your release statement, it probably means so between taking pictures of my release statement and getting stuck on first base off the wall, there's a pretty good chance that baseball has come to a close.
Sure.
With that being said, I'm still fit. I'm not the same guy I was when I was 26, 27, 28 years old, obviously. But my last 11 spring training at bats in the business last 2 springs was 5 for 11 with 2 homers. And it's still there. I remember facing John Strong this year, and possible those bats, so he still hit. I know in my heart of hearts that right now I feel like I got him to be a parent. Yet at the same time, I had a chance to do a couple of things. Like, I'm going to take my time with my family. There wasn't a lot of great opportunities. Obviously, I was like, you know what? I think tell me over. But the other day, we were driving to Cleveland, and we were going through Cincinnati. I was telling kids, "Hey, Dad played at that field or whatever." I'm about home from there, and then we went to Cleveland. I was like, "Yeah, I hit a ball there to left center field. I thought it was a home run, and it hit the top of the wall." And my son, my oldest son, looked at me and goes, "Dad, were you running?" And I said, "Yes, I was running." But you know, and I think about it. I mean, I can still do it. So I told my wife, "Should I go to the Dominican or swim? And should I go to the Dominican and play ball?" And just feeling opportunities come from that. But with that being said, I don't think it's going to happen. And right now, I've literally been trying to slow down, kind of define exactly what that looks like. I do know I want to probably spend baseball. I want to be involved in some ministry stuff.
Sure.
So my family being a big part of that, I'm going to take them the day at a time. Just going to see what unfolds next couple months.
Nice. Awesome. Well, Matt, it's been a real pleasure to hear about your journey, your story, and how God has used you, not just here in the States, but over in Japan for His kingdom purposes. It's been really wonderful to hear that your story of the journey. So, thanks for coming on the show today.
Awesome, man. Kurt, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. I enjoyed every minute of it.
God bless, and hopefully maybe we'll bring you on sometime again in the future.
Awesome, but thank you so much.
Of course. Take care. Bye-bye. All right. Well, that does it for our show today. If you've enjoyed listening to this episode and you want to hear other stories of the journey, you can go to our website, veracityhill.com, and search through the episodes to see other stories of the journey. And also coming up next week, we're going to be talking with Dr. Bob Stewart of New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. We're going to be talking about whether Jesus really is the only way to heaven. Is he the only way for salvation? Good. All right. Well, I'm grateful for the continued support of our patrons. Those are folks that just chip in a few bucks a month to help this podcast move along. And we'd love to get your support, whether it's $20 a month, $10 a month, even $5 a month. We'd love to get your support. Just go to the website, veracityhill.com, and click the Patron tab. I'm also grateful for the partnerships that we have with our sponsors, Defenders Media, Consult Kevin, The Sky Floor, Rethinking Hell, the Illinois Family Institute, Evolution 2.0, and Ratio Christi. And last but not least, I want to thank you for listening in and for striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
You've been listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is a listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.